great leaders, the ones that we should want to lead things, they are humble enough to know that they still have more to learn. If you're willing to accept coaching, I think that's part of what makes a good leader, and it translates to your business as well.
Welcome to the Founders Forum. I'm Blake Tengberg, a transactions attorney at Foley and Lardner.
We are so excited to welcome Melanie Jones, editor-in-chief of Utah Business Magazine, to the show today. Melanie, how you doing?
So great, Blake. How have you been?
We're doing great. Well, we're very excited to have you on the show today. I mean, frankly, anyone who is anyone in Utah knows who you are. You know, from being a speaking coach and a curator for TEDx SLC to an ambassador to now the editor-in-chief, you're everywhere in like the best way possible. So for those who don't know you, though, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a Utah Business Magazine's editor-in-chief? As I understand it, your background isn't even in journalism.
It is not. I mean, okay, fair. I had a little bit of training. I wrote for the Scroll in college up at Rick's College back then. Just gave away my age. It wasn't BYU, Idaho when I was there. I thought I would end up in a career in journalism, but I received a really cool offer from a dental manufacturer in South Jordan, and it would take me all over the world, visiting dozens of countries when I was in my early 20s and had no attachments. It was pretty awesome, and I stayed there for almost 30 years. I loved it so much there, and I learned so many things, and this is basically where I developed all of my leadership skills and all of my business experience was at this one company. Eventually, I felt the tug of journalism pulling at me again. And the publisher of Utah Business gave me this incredible opportunity to take over as editor-in-chief. I think the years I spent in business gave me a unique understanding of our audience and their needs and what they might want to learn. And I just hope I'm serving the audience well.
Oh, I think you're doing a fantastic job. Well, speaking of serving audience as well, I want to touch base a little bit on your experience with TEDx SLC. For our listeners who may not know what that is, it's a program of local self-organized events that bring people together to share a TED-like experience. And so in that position, you were a speaking coach, a curator. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you learned about effective communication and leadership while working with those speakers and organizers in that position.
Sure. Great leaders, the ones that we should want to lead things, they are humble enough to know that they still have more to learn. And pretty much anyone can teach them something. And we saw this over and over with the speakers who would come up through the program. There were people who were super experienced, who were captains of industry, leading big charges. And some of them were really open to coaching. And some of them were like, I got this. You know, I speak all the time. I'm global. I'm whatever. And we would see that when the day would come, those who were willing to put in the work were highly advantaged over those who did not put in the work. Even comparing a CEO with a frontline contributor, the person who was able to put in the work and dedicate and commit to it gave better talks. And the audience doesn't lie. They're all strangers. Like, you might be a big deal in your industry, but the average person probably has not heard of you in this state unless you're Gail Miller or Ryan Smith. People don't know who you are. Even though you're running $1 billion company, they don't know who you are. So they're not going to pay you lip service, and the applause tells you everything. So when you've got somebody who is giving the first speech that she has ever done in her entire life, which was one of our speakers, and then you've got some CEO who was not willing to come to rehearsals, the applause showed it, and also the views of the video showed it. You know, person number one, who was giving her first speech, has like 3 million views now. Wow. And then the other guy is like hanging out under 1,000. And I'm sure that's a blow to the ego, but a great leader and a great communicator understands that they have more to learn and that there are people who are better at certain things than they are. And if you're willing to accept coaching, I think that's part of what makes a good leader, and it translates to your business as well.
Oh, that's incredible. I love the concept of just putting in the hard work, being humble enough and putting in the hard work. I mean, as you mentioned, you've served as a, executive director, advisory board member for a lot of esteemed companies, many of whom are here in Utah. What were some of the common leadership traits that you either learned in those roles or that you have observed over the last few years?
Yeah. I think one of my favorites, it kind of surprised me. So I worked at the same company for almost 30 years, as I mentioned, and then I hopped to a new place. And the way that they did things was different than the way I was used to. The company I was with was kind of, we were all kind of head down, working hard all the time, just pushing forward and not really out in the community much. It didn't affect us. It was a global company. And so what was going on in the local Utah market wasn't necessarily directly relevant, right? So I go to this new company, which was also global, not to the same scale that the first one was. And my boss was constantly going out to lunch with other people. And at first I was like, coming from this culture where we ate at our desks because we were always so head down, I'm like, okay, social butterfly a little bit. But then I started to notice that in meetings, when we were brainstorming how to tackle problems or where to go next with our strategies, this guy always had super creative ideas that I believe were fed from surrounding himself with leaders in the community of different industries. When you think about any great new innovation, everything is kind of stolen, right? And we make a Frankenstein's monster out of something we learned from a movie and something we learned from the stock market and something we learned from the local small business on Main Street. And then we find a twist and make it our own. And it seems revolutionary, but really these ideas come from inspiration that you see in the world. And so this guy, by surrounding himself with people who are outside of his industry and just learning from them, always keeping contacts tight and going to lunch and making sure that he kept in touch with each other, it made him more creative because he had all of these other points of inspiration to go off of instead of what was always in the building with him.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's probably why a lot of people, try to surround themselves, why a lot of founders and startups try to surround themselves with, I don't want to say like-minded people, because I think it's important to hire for your weakness when you are bringing on, a founder team. But it is hiring and bringing on people that are just as dedicated and driven as you are, and eager to learn from other people that really makes a startup successful. So as you know, our show is primarily geared towards entrepreneurs and founders. With that in mind, what would you recommend, or what do you believe are the most important skills or qualities that these individuals should cultivate to really become effective leaders, to not, take where they're at right now to really, where they could be or would hope to be here?
I've got a whole laundry list. You sent me this question. I've been thinking about it since you sent it, and I've got a notepad that I just kept scribbling new things. So the first thing that I thought about was, this was an inspiration from a previous leader I had who, by the way, I'm not great at this. I think that great leaders don't make rash decisions, and they give big ideas some space to breathe. On the other hand, when decisions are low stakes, they can be decisive so that they don't hold up the team, or they might even delegate that decision-making authority. And that's great because it gives their people a chance to practice making low-risk decisions. And you want to do that for succession planning and stuff, to have people coming up behind you who are strong. So you have to give them a chance to practice. But when stuff matters, being able to say, you know what? I'm going to think about this. This feels good right now. My gut is telling me that it's right. But if you can just slow down a tiny bit and give yourself space to process. Maybe whatever you do for exercise, go for a run or lay in the hammock or whatever it is, and don't make rash decisions. I think that that's really important. Good leaders are like talent scouts. They can see potential in every person. And I think being able to see potential from an unconventional resume will bring you really interesting hires and keep you from being in a thought, like a, what do you call it? Echo chamber.
Yeah.
Keep you from being in an echo chamber, to be able to see potential in the unconventional hire.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
I mean, kind of a little bit like your background, going from an executive now to the editor-in-chief, a bit of a interesting transition, but obviously been extremely well for Utah Business Magazine.
Yeah, I guess that was an egotistical thing to put on my list. If you're a great leader,
not at all. No, I mean, this is why we're so excited to have you on the show. I mean, we love what you're doing here in the state. We love all the programs and the initiatives that you're a part of. So sincerely, thank you for what you're doing on behalf of startups and just the state in general. Where can people go to learn more about you or connect with you directly?
UtahBusiness.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn. And I have a whole big other laundry list too, Blake, of leadership things. So maybe I'll do a post on my LinkedIn of the things that we didn't get to, and people can check it out there.
That would be fantastic. Melanie, again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Have a good one.
Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep innovating.